Come and get your love. Come and get your love. Come and get your love, come and get your love, come and get your love now. Oh, hey. Looks like you caught me singing along to Redbone's Come and Get Your Love. Speaking of Redbone's Come and Get Your Love, have you checked out this graphic novel from IDW entitled Redbone, the true story of a Native American rock band? Greetings everybody, Older Jones here. I hope you had a happy holiday and welcome to the premiere episode of my new channel called the Comic Mask Replica. On this channel, I'm going to focus more on superhero-oriented comics in everyday kind of comics, kind of like the one we're doing today, which is based off a real-life Native American rock band, Redbone. Again, I'd like to give my gratitude and thanks to everyone who's been watching my videos. Without you, this wouldn't be worthwhile, so I thank you. Now, before I get into the comic, I just want to state that I am not an IDW fanboy. Well, they do print a lot of the comics I like, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, huge artist editions that from many comic book artists that are awesome. I just wanted to state this before I did another video on an IDW publication. If you're like me, you may not know too much about Redbone, but if you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 or watched Netflix's F is for Family, then you've heard Redbone's music. The song has a very R&B feel to it, so for the longest time I thought it was a Motown band. Here's IDW's Redbone, the true story of a Native American rock band by Christian Stabler, Sonia Peloni, and Theobald Balahi. Redbone started as Pat and Lolly Vegas, who in the early 60s played on Hollywood Boulevard as an up-and-coming act. Pat and Lolly had residencies in clubs like Jazari's and the Haunted House, where they both were the house band and in charge of finding new talent. Some of that new talent included the Byrds, the Doors, and a little guy from Seattle named Jimi Hendrix. Eventually, Pat and Lolly, thanks to the advice of Mr. Hendrix, decided to take a new approach with the band and formed Redbone. Redbone is a Cajun slang for a mixed-race person with some Indian blood. This band would be different. Made of all Native American musicians, Redbone would envelop their roots aesthetically, spiritually, and musically. The story within the graphic novel is told by Pat Vegas as he visits with his daughter Frankie and his co-worker Asela as they go out to lunch and reminisce about Redbone's career. Halfway through, Pat's son PJ shows up to the cry fest that awaits. Kids are eager to hear their dad regale over the same stories over and over again. Pat Vegas, with his perfect memory, begins to trace the timeline and lineage of Redbone lineups, starting off with Chapter 1 about him and his brother Lolly's early career. Chapters 2 and 3 goes into Tony Bellamy's and Peter DePoe's past and how they developed into musicians before joining Redbone. Chapter 4 recounts the studio sessions for their first record and how they finally decided on the name Redbone. Chapter 5 starts by highlighting current Native American struggles like that of Standing Rock and how Wounded Knee and the Pine Ridge Siege some 40 years earlier was the start of the indigenous people coming forward to let their voices be heard. This chapter details some of the most intriguing parts of the novel. I had never heard of AIM, or better known as the American Indian Movement, and how it started in Minneapolis, Minnesota as a sort of neighborhood watch. The group acquired 3 old police cars, painted them red, wore red berets to recognize one another, and began to film acts of police abuse outside of bars. AIM would warn Indians in bars of coming police who would arrest drunk Indians, jail them, and then use their sentence for free labor. Chapter 6 explores Redbone's success and exploits while touring the States and abroad. Funny little moments like accidentally calling the Queen Babe, messing around with another people's wives in Juneau, Alaska, and stealing German police officer's hat as a souvenir are just some of the little funny tidbits they share in this story. Chapter 7 presents itself as the heart of the novel. The Wounded Knee occupation, representing the heart and spirit of the 70s American Indian movement, brings the novel to its spiritual core. At this core are many young Indian Americans coming of age that remember the Wounded Knee Massacre from their elders. That massacre in 1893 represented the end of the American Indian War. At the time, the U.S. government had set up treaties for the Oglala Lakota people with preservations of its land, but settlers and gold miners didn't observe these treaties. This caused much unrest. The U.S. Army told the Lakota people to disarm and that they wouldn't be hurt. A detachment of the U.S. 7th Cavalry Regiment, commanded by Samuel M. Whiteside, escorted the Lakota to the Wounded Knee Creek where they placed the camp. On the morning of December 29th, the cavalry went to the camp to disarm the Lakota of their arms. Something happened, and accounts give different stories as to why the fighting broke out. Some say it was a deaf tribesman hesitating to give away his rifle, which accidentally went off, and some say it was another tribesman doing a dance that set off the cavalry. But when the shooting stopped, over 250 men, women, and children were killed. Included are 51 wounded. Survivors of that massacre would give birth to a new generation who would remember the atrocities conducted by the U.S. government. My recount does not do the story of this incident any justice. I would recommend researching this, which there are some YouTube videos documenting this and that 71-day siege. Also, do yourself a favor and listen to the song's lyrics by Redbone. Some of the most poetic and defiant song lyrics I've ever heard. Nonetheless, the tribal president in Pine Ridge in 1973, Dick Wilson, was making a profit from the reservation land and selling it to oil companies instead of helping the poverty problem on the reservation. Dick had his own militia known as the Goon Squad that would threaten, pressure those who didn't agree with his practices. 100 miles away from Wounded Knee, a white man killed a young 20-year-old Wesley Bad Heart Bull. The man who murdered him was only charged with involuntary manslaughter instead of murder. This outraged AIM and the surrounding communities. They came to the county courthouse where the judge met with the murderer. Outside, 200 protesters demanded to be heard, and when they were denied entry, they rioted. The reservation had had enough. What happened next was a 71-day siege on the reservation at Pine Ridge. I have a link in the description that will take you to a documentary about this siege in more detail. Moving on from the events in South Dakota, chapters 8, 9, and 10 deal with the demise of the band's Mach 1 lineup through today's different incarnations of Redbone. The last chapter goes over Pat and Lolly's childhoods on the res, which I guess bookends the story but feels a tad out of place. That's okay though, because this story kept me interested throughout my read. The afterword by Christian Stabler describes when Stabler was in college and a professor of his introduced him to the band. That led to an obsession that manifested in a French website dedicated to Redbone's career and finding others on the internet with a similar interest in the band. Fast forward to present day, and what you have in your hand is a passion project on the part of Mr. Stabler and Mrs. Paloni. Then we have a brief interview with Pat Vegas, a bibliography containing books that tie directly to the graphic novel story, and last but not least, a discography. Yes, a discography is included, and a paragraph for each album is included. I think including this material helps the reader to do their research into the band and the events that surrounded the music. If you want to learn more about Redbone and other indigenous cultures and histories, I implore you to pick up this graphic novel from your local comic shop. If they don't have it, ask them to order it for you. If you don't have a comic shop near you or anything, try to find it from an online retailer for a small shop. I think I'm just trying to advise you not to buy it from a big box retailer, because at this time during the pandemic, it's really crucial that we support small businesses like comic shops. If you can't find it for some reason anywhere, you can go into Comixology and get it there digitally. Now let's go into the artwork in this novel. Theobald Balahi's art is intriguingly different from your standard comic book fare. For the most part, panels are gone, so Theobald's artwork can shine. Theobald uses a variety of line techniques to present certain panels of the story. Colors are simple duotones and two-tones that make his line work pop out of the page thanks to the natural spackled pages. I really enjoy his illustrations because they're loose and I can appreciate that. His use of primary colors blends well with his inks. This presents a warm, bright, but sometimes cold appearance. The writing is okay for the most part, but some of it feels a little matter-of-fact. And I'm not a great writer either, so I won't dwell on it too much. I'm sure Mrs. Paoloni helped Mr. Stabler put this together and make it cohesive, and at the same time, flow well and read well. Again, this was a big passion project for Mr. Stabler, and I hope he decides to write another graphic novel about a band. The page count is fairly big at about 160, but you could easily read this in one afternoon. For those who don't know, I'm a musician myself, or I've played in bands for, a number of years. Not so much lately, but I've traveled around some of the US and had some great experiences and had some not so great experiences. And that's kind of on par for being in a band, really. So when it comes to something like this graphic novel about a band, I totally dig it. I've read numerous, autobiographies on rock stars and everything. They're highly entertaining, and confessionals and that kind of thing. So I really appreciate this one. So while researching this video, I had to watch a lot of Redbone videos, and going down the comments, there's just a lot of people thanking Redbone for their music, and there's a lot of people stating, what tribe or nation they come from. Redbone has had an amazing impact on Indigenous cultures across the country and probably the world. They were more popular in Europe around the times they were active than they were in the US. I recommend this book to those who are fans and to those who are not. I believe there is a big market for this book, so the reason I'm making this video is because I want people to know about it, be aware about it, and try to get it. Redbone isn't even recognized by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but I am not worried about that right now. They deserve to be, because the nominating community, they probably need to get more people, Indigenous descent, and diversity before that's going to happen. That should complete my video for Redbone, True Story of a Native American Rock Band. Thanks for watching it. Again, make sure you subscribe to the Older Jones channel so you know when new videos drop. Again, this is going to be a new part of the channel where I do everyday kind of sort of comics, but mostly superhero comics. So thank you.